Welcome to Straight Outta Workers' Comp here from WCI. This is Mark Pugh. Bob is talking to somebody about something right now, so he can't join me. So I'm flying solo. So I'm here with my brother Darrell, my other brother Darrell, Darrell Bruga with Empatha. Darrell and I have known each other for, 2010, 2011, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah, it was a coffee.
Maybe even before that.
It may have been.
I think it was more like 2008.
Wow. Well, it was a coffee shop in Palo Alto, I remember.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Because I was still running the chronic pain program.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I don't remember
that
what
ended 2010.
Okay, so it must have been 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but I do remember Palo Alto and the coffee shop.
Yeah.
But Darrell's been on the forefront of all sorts of things related to biopsychosocial, managing pain, the PGAP program, and so forth. So Darrell, really excited to have you a part of our podcast. So to start off with, how are we doing as an industry in embracing the biopsychosocial, the connecting the brain and the mind to the physical aspects of the injury?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely terrific that people are paying attention to it. I don't think implementation has really taken off just yet, but I mean, we've been talking about this for quite some time. I came from the clinical space, had a brick and mortar center, and saw the need to take that model, that multidisciplinary model, and be able to scale it across the United States to drive the biopsychosocial programs, that injured workers really need. And I did watch your earlier panel with Dr. Curtay, and to his point, we were all running around, including myself and Dr. Copeland and a number of folks were at there was one conference. It's really interesting. Everyone was there. It was in LA. It was very clinical. I don't even remember what conference it was, but there were a bunch of insurers there too. And everyone was talking about what needed to happen from a biopsychosocial model. And I was just getting my start. Dr. Copeland was maybe a couple years ahead of me. And, you felt the energy that it was going to be some dramatic shift and things were going to take off. That did not happen. I'm here to tell you. But I ended up leaving I sold my interest in my program, my brick and mortar multidisciplinary program, back to my physician partners, and went out to start developing and working with Dr. Michael Sullivan, what's called Progressive Goal Attainment Program, PGAP. And it really it's just a terrific program. It's very standardized, something that you can easily implement. But so there's nothing wrong with the service itself, or if it works. It's really, how do we get the payers and employers to start really using that, identifying the need for the service and executing it. I think there's a lot of terrific discussions at WCI, at the national, at the different conferences, and also in the disability space too, not just workers' comp. But there's a lot of talk about it, but not necessarily a lot of execution. I think there are some positive things from the advocacy model I've seen and some of the empathic communications with claims examiners and case managers. I think that's terrific. That's a no-brainer. But when it comes to the services side, it has been a struggle. I think there's been a number of casualties along the way from a business perspective of actually getting this implemented. And some players have come and gone, right? And so I think there's a long ways to go, but I do think there seems to be a little bit of a shift. I mean, 2 years ago, I think it was, that WCRI really put a focus on this with the behavioral primer for behavioral health, and PGAP and cognitive behavioral therapy, and those types of interventions were listed in there. There does seem to be a shift that way, but I think one of the things that's really going to drive it, in my opinion, at least the type of stuff that we're working on, is artificial intelligence. Because, there's such a huge caseload at the payer level. Like, you might have buy-in, but even the large payers have real difficulty getting us cases. And even the ones that have lots of case managers on staff. And so I think you need more education and time and tools given to those case managers to help them identify those claims. But I think also from a artificial intelligence standpoint, if we can integrate with that data and that system, that claim system, to give them a heads up on the ones that are going to be they're going to be that delayed recovery claim. It's going to be the most challenging claim. Then we can start mapping out, predictively what that claim is going to look like and what it will look like if you don't refer for more of a biopsychosocial type of approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think also is a lack of resources. There's plenty of mom and pop sort of deals, and there are a few businesses within the workers' comp space that are addressing this, but it's just barely scratching the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're going to need more training, more providers, more training around the referral, the claims payers and the case managers, but you're also going to need additional systems to actually execute these services. At the same time, we see a real dramatic increase. We don't just do PGAP, we do cognitive behavioral therapy as well using psychologists. And what you'll see is ever since the pandemic, mental health issues have gone up.
Oh, yeah.
And those psychologists are very busy.
And recognition of mental health issues have gone up considerably. Yeah.
And that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of good things happening, but also those providers are booked up.
Yeah.
And it is hard to arrange services and get them in a timely manner. So, we're working on models to improve that efficiency so you have access to providers quickly. But there are some real challenges to implementing it. So it's not like if they did just flip on a switch, I don't think it's necessarily going to work
mm-hmm.
right away. There's a lot of work left to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's very positive. It's been in the guidelines. I think the biopsychosocial model has really been initially started with the Colorado workers' comp guidelines with Dr. Mueller, getting those kind of the beginning of really what this came, the other guidelines kind of came from that. It really seems. And then you ultimately had ACOM and ODG start to incorporate the biopsychosocial model into the guidelines. And so we've been talking about it for quite some time,
mm-hmm.
But it's still just that execution. And that's not that inconsistent with what happens in clinical practice. It takes about 24 years, they say.
Really?
Yeah, it's something like that. It might be 20 years. I'm not sure, but it's some number like that.
It's a big number.
Some specific crazy amount
almost
of time.
Like a generation.
Yeah, for the science to be able to actually become implemented. Now, I think some of those types of things are changing, with evidence-based medicine, evidence-based care. I think that maybe that's speeding up a little bit. But, I mean, if you look at this, the guidelines came out it was over 24 years ago.
Okay.
And we're just still kind of scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when we first met, my focus in starting 2003 was the overprescribing of opioids.
Yes.
And I kind of talked in terms of cleaning up the mess.
Yes.
We had created a mess over many, many years.
Yep.
We have kind of done that, and you were a big part of that,
Yeah.
and a variety of other people. So there's a big thing in engaging the biopsychosocial early.
Yes.
As opposed to after it's become a train wreck, after it's become maybe the injury wasn't physically traumatic or catastrophic, but the finances have been, because nothing seems to work and they don't ever get back.
Yeah.
So what are some triggers or some things to earlier in the process, recognizing, they don't have the level of resilience.
Yep.
Maybe, there's perceived injustice that's
Yes.
driving that. What are some things that are either pretty objective to be able to discover, or subjective that you can only kind of glean from a conversation?
Yeah, and I think the subjective stuff is good. I think it is still somewhat of a barrier to really executing this on a level where we can scale it and have a real impact. But yes, we do. We oftentimes will give case managers sort of language things that they can listen for when they're talking to injured workers. What fear avoidance sounds like, what perceived injustice sounds like, catastrophizing, etc. I think those are really important. But I do think the triggers, like going back to the AI, triggering, a tripwire that puts up the flag that says, hey, this is one that's probably going to be challenging. Might not know everything about that claim just yet, but now you should probably go get a further look at it. And I think that's where I see a real need for upfront service providers, and including case managers, to be able to actually do an assessment. It's a screening, right? Where they're not doing a psychological assessment,
right,
using the DSM and all that kind of stuff.
PHQ-9
and I mean, and that's good, but I think just on a psychosocial level, whether you have a physical claim or a mental health claim, looking at the psychosocial risk factors, which are not diagnoses, so you're not going to get a psych claim. It's just does that person have sort of a negative orientation to their health condition? Are they a catastrophizer? Do they feel like they were wronged, with and they have a level of sense of unfairness, perceived injustice, those types of things. So we have set up questionnaires that a link can go to the injured worker, and this comes from the case manager. So within their system, they're sending that link. When they're working with the injured worker early on, that injured worker receives a link. They can complete it on their phone. They can complete it on their computer if it goes to their email. But they can complete a pretty early assessment and see if any of those risk factors exist. Then we've incorporated the functional pieces to it as well. So what's called the multidimensional task ability profile, and we've included the more mainstream stuff that you're familiar with, like oswestry, neck disability index, lower extremity, the LE, whatever it is, the LESS or whatever. So we have those questionnaires built in as well. But the idea is to give that case manager more tools so they can objectively say, hey, look, it really does seem like there's something more going on here. Let's get them over to a service provider that does this type of work. And so that's our goal. We've worked on executing that with a couple different companies. It doesn't always, hasn't always worked out just because of their existing operations. But I think we're seeing more of a willingness to take that up. It is an extra step, but it's not like, it's an API to their system. So it's really just making sure that the individual actually completed the assessment. If you're 2 weeks later and they still haven't done it, just a little reminder to them to get it done. Because when you have that information up front, functional information, psychosocial information, maybe the claim doesn't have much of that stuff, and they're doing really well. Well, then you don't need to spend as much time maybe on that one. Those ones that are full of, they got 4 of the 4 psychosocial risk factors that are high. Those are the kind of folks you want to make sure that you're getting over to a provider. Yeah. So we believe in the questionnaires. Sure, you can do verbal things, you can do things over the phone, but I think if you can get a little bit more robustness to it, you really start developing a bit more insight into how those cases are going to go.
And they're clinically assessed. I mean, they're not just something that somebody just made up on the fly.
Yes.
They're the actual physicians, and it also gives you a lot of data.
Yes.
So if you're looking holistically and trying to create baselines and compare this patient to 300 others that have had, it gives you a lot of stuff.
Yep.
One of the things that has evolved since, and we lost touch for a little bit, and then but during that time, there was the discussion on social determinants of health.
Yes.
Which is something that nobody has ever talked about in work comp until maybe the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Yep.
Explain a little bit of what SDOH is and how that differs from psychosocial issues, but how they also merge together and potentially create this really toxic brew of this person is probably never going to get better.
It's a great area to focus on, because if you look at really, and it is different than the psychosocial risk factors, right, are going to be more like you're catastrophizing, how someone's processing their health condition and their situation. But whereas you have the social determinants, you're looking at what's their economic background, what kind of alcoholism, drug abuse, family
medical
issues,
literacy,
the
big thing. They don't understand everything they're being told to do.
And then with our demographic of injured workers that are a lot of resilient workers, but not always a lot of education, and so you end up with a very challenging population. And I saw a lot of that, especially in the chronic pain program. And we spent a lot of time with education and helping them understand the system, workers' comp system, and other types of important things that make for a whole person approach, because oftentimes this might be the first time when they've encountered us, providers like ourselves, that they've actually had anyone talk to them about that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a challenging population. That's always also why I got into it. I really enjoyed this population. When I started practice early, I was getting a lot of really challenging cases. I started practice with a chronic pain anesthesiologist, and boy, let me tell you, these were some of the worst, most difficult injured workers you could get. And a lot of them had pain pumps at the time back then, and failed surgeries and all these different things. And so I really grew to love that population and how challenging they were, but I didn't have all the tools to deal with them. And that's why I ended up creating a multidisciplinary program so that I could address that better. But there's still a lot of what workers' comp is about. A lot of people are going to get better. They're not going to need anything like what we're talking about. But, there was a recent study with a WCRI that showed a third to 50% of all injured workers in physical therapy have high psychosocial risk factors, which is much higher than what we've been talking about for the last 20 years.
Definitely, yeah.
The last 20 years, we've been saying kind of like 10 to 15%. It's much more
Did it used to be 10 to 15%? Now it's just gotten worse, or did we undercount it back
I think
then?
we didn't. Yeah, I think we've undercounted it.
Okay.
I don't know exactly why that is, but I've always felt that it is a bit higher than it just didn't make sense because, it seems like almost every single case that's coming through, maybe there's good selection criteria. I don't know, and there's some bias around that with the provider sending us cases or the insurer sending us cases, and they already know. But it sure does seem like a lot of people are dealing with that. Now, does that mean everyone needs some grand program? No, not necessarily. But you have your systems, our system and other people that do this kind of work, that we have metrics internally determine really what they really need at that point. So we don't need to put everyone through some Mercedes model.
Right.
But, when we can spend a little more time with more of a high touch, whole person approach program, I think you're going to get much better outcomes. Yeah. And that's what we've seen over time.
Well, you don't want to send anybody through the Yugo model, that's for sure.
No, not the Yugo.
So you've been ahead of the curve many times in your career. Spin forwards, let's say 3 years, just pick a random number. I used to say, give me your 5-year plan. It's like, I got no clue now because things move so quickly,
so
right?
Fast, yeah.
Yeah. So let's say, 2 to 3 years forward.
Yeah.
What do you see as different? What do you see has evolved? What do you see maybe as new opportunities or maybe new challenges that maybe are like undercounted to that? Maybe there's some things that are kind of simmering that you kind of see, but haven't. What give us kind of a flavor as we finish this up? Like what does look like in 2 to 3 years?
It's interesting. I do think the technology is really infusing with the services side of what we're seeing, and that's across all workers' comp, right? So how do you identify the right individual for whatever service you're doing, whether it's case management or a biopsychosocial program or something else? And so I think you're going to see more of that because there's where you're going to really get your return on investment. I think it'll take a little time. It's going to take a little time for those models to learn further. We have a lot of claims data that we can work with. Now you need to, as you run people through those services, that feedback loop is going to really educate itself. So I think that's a key piece. I think telehealth is here to stay. I think as far as the in-person services, certainly most people are still doing that, but from a behavioral health standpoint, I tell you, a lot of providers are not doing in-person anymore.
Really?
Even the ones that have offices or they've moved away from offices, just seems like a lot of providers are really liking that telehealth model.
Is that scalability? Is it documentation? Is it?
I'm not sure. I think it could be just cost cutting too. You don't have an office, a staff, things like that. But I will tell you, we like the telehealth model because we're able to use the same providers repeatedly and have good outcomes. If you wanted to set up a referral in more rural California or something like that, and you've got to use a provider you've never worked with before, man, that is going to be so much different of an outcome probably than our sort of senior level pain psychologist that does telehealth. I'd rather have that telehealth psychologist any day. Yeah. So I like that rinse and repeat. And from a scalability perspective, it just makes sense. That was something, 10 years ago, you weren't getting much traction on telehealth. We kept trying and no one wanted us to do it. So we had to keep doing it in person.
Hockey stick growth and during COVID.
COVID was very much a blessing, a silver lining in that regard. Yeah. And I think then more, we're working on some of the chatbot stuff as well, not as a replacement for cognitive behavioral therapy, of course, but as an augmentation. So I think you'll see more and more of that. And that's already kind of taken off already. I mean, it's well on its way, but I think some more integration around there. And then I think from the AI perspective, what it will drive is the ability to actually take on risk on these types of claims. And I think that's the direction that, it's more of a value-based, performance-based model, whatever you want to call it. But, a model that you can really take that risk model to another level based on the data that we'll have available.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And now for the most important question.
Yeah.
what is the best barbecue restaurant in Texas?
I mean, I'd say
we talked about one that
Yeah.
you happened into is number 2 ranked, right?
Number 2 was great. I just went to Leroy and Lewis. That was absolutely terrific. But Burnt Bean is the one I've been loving, and that got number 1. It got voted number 1 on the Texas Top 50.
So your tastes are in line with mainstream as far as what's good barbecue.
I guess so. I don't know. And I think some of these players that are getting they're getting these nominations and recognition are more like new school versus infused with old school barbecue.
Okay,
and these guys are coming up with some great stuff.
So you're an old school barbecue guy or a new school?
I mean, a little more new school. I like that infusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Good stuff.
Well, pork is better than brisket, right?
Just
kidding. No, I'm a Georgia guy.
Hey, I love myself some pork ribs. I'm so about pork ribs.
Yeah.
But yeah, brisket. I was never a brisket fan, probably because I always had terrible brisket.
Because you're the Bay Area.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not a lot of brisket in San Francisco.
Like, how does anyone like brisket? And then you go to Texas, and you're like, oh, I see.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Darrell. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
All righty.
Thank you.
And that will finish our time at WCI. Hope y'all have enjoyed these podcasts. They will continue to be available, and reach out and touch us on LinkedIn, on comments, anywhere else that you want to have some consistent and constant feedback. Thanks. Take care.